What's the most inaccurate thing your child has ever been taught in school? My son's 5th grade class was taught that the pyramids were built by slaves. He came home from school, dropped his backpack and said, "Did you know thousands of slaves died making the pyramids? The pharaohs treated them like animals." He sounded so sure of it. It caught me off guard because I'm an archaeologist who specializes in ancient Egyptian construction. And I knew, that's just flat out wrong. Modern evidence has completely debunked the slave labor myth. The pyramids were built by skilled workers, paid craftsmen and seasonal farmers during the Nile flood season when farming wasn't possible. It wasn't some brutal death camp. It was one of the most organized labor projects in ancient history. I calmly explained this to my son, showed him photos of worker villages, bakeries, medical centers, but he frowned. But we watched a video about it, and our textbook shows pictures of slaves pulling huge blocks. So I emailed his teacher and offered to give a short presentation during their Egypt unit. She responded with a polite, "That would be lovely." When I walked into the classroom, 23 kids were sitting cross-legged on a rug, bouncing with excitement. The teacher introduced me as an actual archaeologist, and I asked, "What have you all learned about how the pyramids were built?" Hands flew up. Slaves, whips, pharaohs killed workers if they were too slow. They had no machines, so they needed lots of slaves. I pulled out my tablet and said, "Actually, we found the worker villages at Giza, and they show something very different." I showed images of the excavated town, rows of bakeries that made fresh bread every day, butcher shops with animal bones, clinics with medical tools. These people were fed well. They had doctors. They weren't being whipped. They were being cared for. The kids were hooked. I told them about graffiti found inside the pyramids from work crews, teams calling themselves things like the drunkards of Menkaure. I told them about graves found nearby with careful burial practices and afterlife offerings. Slaves don't usually get buried like that, I said. But workers who were valued, they do. The teacher was nodding until I mentioned the textbook. I said gently, "Unfortunately, the old narrative about slaves building the pyramids is still in a lot of textbooks and pop culture, but it's not supported by the archaeological evidence." Her smile tightened. "Well, that's interesting," she said, "but our curriculum does specifically mention slave labor." I showed her x-rays of skeletons with healed bone fractures. Slaves don't get months of rest and medical care. Workers with job security do. A little girl raised her hand. "So our textbook is wrong?" The teacher cut in quickly. "There are different theories." "Not really," I said. "This isn't a debate among modern Egyptologists. Even the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities officially rejects the slave narrative. It just takes time for the materials to catch up." After class, the teacher pulled me aside. "Look, I appreciate your expertise, but you've put me in an awkward position. I have to use the standardized curriculum. I've taught this unit for 15 years. The kids like the story of the slaves. It's dramatic." I offered updated resources from the Archaeological Institute. Free, kid-friendly, accurate. She barely acknowledged them. The next day, my son came home confused. We did a worksheet about pyramid slaves again. I told her what you said, and she said it's just one theory. I sent a very polite email. Attached links to current research. CC'd the principal. A week later, the principal replied, thanking me and saying they were reviewing the social studies materials. No word from the teacher. At our next parent-teacher conference, she rushed through my son's progress report like she couldn't get us out fast enough. When the school held Ancient Egypt Day at the end of the unit, I offered to bring in replica artifacts and hieroglyph stamp kits. No response. The bulletin board still showed student drawings of slaves dragging stones under the blazing sun. Now, my son fact-checks everything. "Dad, is it true that?" is how he starts most school-related conversations. He recently told me, "I think I want to be an archaeologist too, so I can tell people when history books are lying." I'm proud of his critical thinking, but I won't lie. It hurts to know I made things harder for him at school. Still, I can't regret it, because teaching him that even well-meaning authority figures can be wrong, that facts matter, and truth is worth standing up for, that's the kind of history lesson worth fighting for.